Say Never Again is a 1983 unofficial James Bond sequel. This is directed by Irvin Kershner, and it stars Sean Connery. Yes, he is back as Agent 007. Now, this has been 12 years since his last Bond film, Diamonds Are Forever, so this is pretty huge. Back during the promotion of that film, Sean Connery said, "I'm never going to do another James Bond film," which makes this movie's title pretty fitting. I don't know if he said that because he was getting older or if he had some type of falling out with the company itself, but either way, he did come back to do this movie. Now, I say unofficial sequel because this wasn't made by the usual studio that produces the James Bond movies. This was made by an independent company. So if you ever try to buy the complete James Bond films, the series, you won't see this movie in the collection, which is kind of sad. Now, the plot is we see that terrorist group, Spectre, they're back. They steal 2 nuclear weapons to use for what? You guessed it. Harm. So James Bond, who has kind of sort of been in retirement, comes out to stop this group once and for all. Now, what I thought of Never Say Never Again was I quite enjoyed this movie, which is interesting because this film came out in the same year as Octopussy. And I normally, at least I would try not to compare Sean Connery and Roger Moore and their styles of James Bond movies because they are completely different. They play them completely different ways. And I like each of them for different reasons. However, because this came out in the same exact year, it's forcing you to have these two films sort of compared, and see which one is better. So, because I feel like I have to do that, it's obvious that Sean Connery is the better James Bond. That's not really a bulletin to anyone, but I don't want to make it seem like I'm going to start bashing Roger Moore because I'm one of the few people that like Roger Moore as James Bond. I think he has an interesting style to it, but seeing Sean Connery back in this film, it does make you go, wow. You almost forgot just how good this guy was. And not only that, for him being the age that he is now, and how into it he still is, how charismatic, just how confident he has when he plays Bond, it's no wonder that even him being older, you still buy that he is Bond. You still buy that he can pull the women that he's pulling in this movie. Or when you see just how physical James Bond is. Wow. Because in my review for Octopussy, I mentioned how Roger Moore seemed like he was dating himself. That he really wasn't getting that physical the way James Bond should be in these films. And Sean Connery came in and said, look, this is James Bond. You gotta get down and dirty. You gotta get in there. Like the scene, which this is actually funny to see Bond because he's older have to go through this, where he's doing these practice missions. He's trying to prove that he's still got it, and he's going through this training, and he's trying to get back in shape. He's trying to prove to the agency that he still is in shape. While he's in this facility, this assassin comes in there and they have this brawl. They fight all over in all these rooms, throwing each other through glass, and for the most part, I'd say at least 90% of this fight is Sean Connery. You see his face, he's in there, he's going for it, and I'm just like so amazed by that. I mean, I know nowadays maybe that's not as impressive, but back then, and for the age that he is, kudos to Sean Connery. Now, I should probably mention the Bond girl in this movie is Kim Basinger. And I've always liked Kim Basinger, mostly for Batman '89. But seeing her here 5 years younger, it's like, wow, she is beautiful. And it's not like that's another bulletin. I mean, we know she's beautiful, but there's something about her natural beauty, and her role in this movie. She's the girlfriend of one of the leading members of Spectre, and you really get the genuine sense from her that she's not bad, she's not evil, and she's not even dumb. She just kind of started dating this guy, and before she figured out it was too late, or just how crazy he was, she was kind of in too deep, and she was stuck with him. And she's one of the few Bond girls that I actually wanted James Bond to try to save. Also, I have to mention Rowan Atkinson, who we all know as Mr. Bean or Johnny English. He shows up in this movie, and just his face is goofy. I know this is well before those films, but still, when I saw him run up to Sean Connery, and he was still being a little goofy, still, I got a kick out of seeing him in this film. There are some silly moments, though, like when Bond basically stops and plays Battleship with the main villain. I mean, it's not Battleship per se, but it's a virtual video game, handheld video game, where they're basically shooting at each other in the video game. And whoever loses, they get this intense shock from the game. And Bond is losing until he finally beats the villain at the end. And I just thought that was a little silly. Just a little bit. I think it was more for 1983 being impressed with how the effects for the game looked. But still, it's almost like they just stop the movie to play a video game. But that doesn't mean that it ruins the film or anything, or takes you out of the danger. There's still some cool action stuff, like when Bond, he goes back to his room to find his partner, who she's been murdered. She's literally dead in the waterbed. Like, so creepy. It's almost reminiscent of where the girl died covered in gold. Memorable death. And also some of the action where Bond goes on a motorcycle and he's chasing the villains all through the streets. Great action. Or even later on when he has to save Kim Basinger and they're riding a horse being chased, and them on the horse jumps off the roof of the house and they go into the water, and it's like it looks like they really jumped off of there with a freaking horse. So again, never say never again. I'm not going to say it's the greatest Bond movie, but I was getting a little bored of the Roger Moore movies. No real fault of Roger Moore, but I just feel like those movies were getting a little stale. So it was refreshing to see Sean Connery, the definitive James Bond, come back, and even the film as a whole felt like Bond. It felt like classic Bond. Anyways, guys, let me know in the comments below if you have seen Never Say Never Again. It's kind of a rare one. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe. Later!